Hello, welcome to Be Make Do, a Soul Makers podcast where we explore what it takes to pursue your calling as an artist with spiritual wholeness and creative freedom. I'm your host, Lisa Smith.
And I'm Dan BH. This season, we're talking about motivation, success, and fulfillment by exploring the 6 artist spiritual archetypes: the maker, the mystic, the imaginative visionary, the storyteller, the soul healer, and the prophetic critic.
That's a mouthful. Good job. Well, we created a great quiz to help you become really conscious of what motivates and excites you to make what you were created to make. We're all different, and probably none of us fit neatly into any one of those categories, those archetypes. But thinking about your deeper motivations can help you build a creative path for your work and life that's fulfilling and avoids getting caught in traps around striving for some idea of success or career that might not really fit you. In addition to exploring these archetypes, we're talking with creatives about how their unique motivations help them overcome challenges and find sometimes unconventional paths to a fulfilling life in the arts.
And if you want to know what your artist archetype is, just head over to soulmakers.org/quiz or find the link in our show notes.
In our previous episode, we explored the maker. We looked at their motivations and challenges and what's necessary to thrive. So if you haven't had a chance to take a listen, go back after this episode when you get a chance. But today, we are going to be talking with musician, photographer, and maker Jason Hamacher. Let's get started.
Let's do it.
We are joined today for a conversation by Jason Hamacher, who's a musician and a photographer. He's a lot of things. He's a musician. He was the drummer for the punk hardcore band Frodus, an accomplished photographer and documentarian. He founded Lost Origin Productions, has a gallery in DC, launched the project to document Syrian chants with the ancient Aramaic-speaking Syrian Orthodox Church, which we got to participate with a little. We got to show some of that work after that was recorded and photographed. He's also a licensed massage therapist and businessman. He's everything. Thank you, Jason. I know I'm not the first person to notice that you don't really fit neatly into a box, right?
That is correct. Not by choice.
Just the way you're made, huh?
Yeah, it's something that I actually talk to my children about often.
Yeah. Really?
Which is like, it's like, what do you do when you're not like other people? And it can be a positive and it can be a negative. It can also be a massive weight for me specifically. So like, I have to, like, when I'm in a group of strangers or I'm at an event or something, and depending on the vibe of the room, I very delicately try to figure out how do I introduce myself without causing weirdness. But like when you're in the creative world, in my, almost everything I do is like a little bit, not a bit sketchy, but like left of center.
Right.
Like it can be polarizing or make others uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form. And I'm highly aware and ultra sensitive to it. And so it's just something that I kind of explained to my kids. Like, even like as a parent, I was like, do your friends think that I'm too weird? Like if I like chaperone something with my kids,
right?
I'm like, hey, if I get to be like too weird, you just let me know. I was like, I will never purposely embarrass you in public ever, but I will maybe do it by accident. Just pull me aside. They say, hey, tone it down. I was like, okay, fine.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, I mean, I think that's like in the quiz that you took with the archetypes that's kind of where it's a fun little tool to think about our motivations. And right. I wasn't totally sure, but as I was looking, it looked like you kind of scored a little bit of everything, like that kind of makes sense too for you. Like what would you say what motivates you to create? Like what kind of makes you tick?
Well, what's funny is I've never thought about that until the last like 2 years, maybe. Like, I don't reflect on what I do or why until someone else encourages me to. Like I had a moment, and like with our exhibit, with our like, it was mostly with Christina, where Christina was like, I need you to submit an artist statement.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't consider myself an artist. I'm not going to do that. It's like, you have to. I was like, what do you mean? Like, it's my stuff. But it was no, but like, it was a major, for the first time, I like seeing everything up on the wall. I was like, okay, I am an artist, like I do. And I am not the type of individual that functions out of definition of self. Like I do, right?
Right.
And so, regardless of what that is, and so a lot of times going through and figuring out, why do I create, or why do I do the things that I do? But a lot of it was to kind of navigate myself, to learn myself. But then also, my role has changed now as like an arts and cultural promoter in DC, which is, how do I facilitate the best possible experience for an artist?
Right.
And then, being an artist and doing all those things, like, I can kind of problem solve for someone based on my, experiences, positive and negative, and try to just ensure that it's something that I would be proud of doing alone, let alone with someone else, whether that person's like famous or up and coming or a student. Like, it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah. Well, you strike me as somebody who gets really excited about like making something, like
100%.
It's that maker piece of things, that it's all about the work.
Yeah. I get, one of the things I really enjoy is exhibit design, is getting lots of people like to, like, hey, could you send me, plans for the gallery? And then, they'll kind of come up with an exhibit in their head. And when they show up, I retain executive final cut. And so I was, so for example, like, I had an exhibit, and the artist brought a bunch of friends to install, and they were kind of going over all these things. And, I'm a night owl. We were there till like 2. And then, the friends started to kind of peel off. And I was like, hey, if you will allow me, it's like, you can say no. It's like, but can I redo your exhibit the way that I think it should look? And then, we'll put it back if you don't like it, but I would like you to see the way that I see your work.
Yeah.
And then no one ever puts it back.
Wow.
Like, there's some pushback, like not pushback, but there's some like, well, what if we did this, or what if we did this? And so, it's the delicate art of arranging something that's engaging in every way, as opposed to just one or two things.
Yeah. Do you think about like what the audience's experience of that will be?
100%.
Yeah. I'm trying to like draw lines between curating an exhibit and like a punk rock band, and, feeling drawn towards recording these Syrian chants. And what's the through line there for you?
I don't know.
Curiosity.
Well, I mean, my music career started when I was young. I was 17. Like, we recorded our first record when I was 17.
Wow.
And by record, I mean, yes, literally it was a record, but a lot of the drive to do, whether it's touring or doing the things in Syria or even the gallery. It's kind of the adventure of doing it, like the journey, I would say, of doing it. Like, I'm about as outgoing as it gets.
Right.
And so, you know, meeting people along the way, so if you, I think I've been thinking about this a lot. You know, like Lost Origins has been open longer than Frodus was a band. That's weird. Wow. You know, Lost Origins has been open for 7.5 years. Yeah. And so thinking about that, it's like kind of coming up with a comparison of, regardless of what the outcome is taking everything extremely seriously. Like, I joke around 90% of the time, but know when to be serious, you know, like you can be extremely serious and be joking at the same exact time, you know, which is my art. That's my art form. But the other side of that is bringing, well, you know, Frodus was jokey in our lyrics. I would joke around behind the drums, but it was a serious band that we took all over the world. And so I guess kind of the through line is this sense of discovery and of adventure and of service, you know. One of the big takeaways, like, you know, the Syria project's been 19 years, you know, like my, it started in 2005. And so, one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about is, like, I started Lost Origin Productions as a photography / like kind of cultural company, but it was more out of service to these communities. Like, you know, I taught myself all this stuff. I'm not some PhD that's like, I think I should be going to Syria and doing these things. I was like, it's crazy that you can't hear it. Do you want me to do it for you? How much would that cost? Cover my expenses. I don't need to get paid. You know, like maybe to the detriment of my professional life. I should have some sort of hourly rate for something like this, but I don't, you know? And so over the years, and it's the same thing with Lost Origins. It's like, how can this place be of service to the artist? You know, I say conversation over commerce. I don't care if anyone sells anything. And that's at my expense. I mean, I'm not some independently wealthy person. Like, I choose to not profit off of someone else's creativity. If someone else wants to sell their work, that's awesome. I can make it happen. But, you know, people come and they buy things at the gallery. It's not like it's a component to the gallery, but it's not the impetus for the gallery. Right. And because I approach things that way, it creates a sense of kind of safety and comfort with the artists that I work with most of the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you feel like if you had to do it differently, like if you had, that would kill part of the motivation? Like if having to make a lot of money and fit some particular mold of quote unquote success in that, if you felt that pressure, how would that affect kind of the choices that you've made over time?
Well, I mean, I have to make money. Like, I'm
right.
But so for example, a couple of years ago, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I hosted this like private event. I don't remember who was the host. I think it was maybe the State Department or something. Brought 50 educators to Washington, D.C. and like on a tour bus. And so in the morning they came to Lost Origins, and then they went to a Smithsonian, and then to a this and a that. And so one of the educators asked me, you know, she was an 8th grade teacher, I think, from the Midwest. And she was like, you know, one of my students really wants to be a successful photographer. Like, what would your advice be for them? I was like, get a steady job. Don't make it your job. Like when you go from like, whether it's a band or your art form or whatever, when you go from choosing, I need to profit off of my interest, you are going down the road of, you have to figure out how to compromise with yourself, unless whatever you do is naturally commercially viable with people.
Yeah.
Everything that I do as a creative individual is not commercially viable. Ancient Christian chants, not that commercially viable. Weird DC angular punk rock, not that viable. Like, yes, there's a niche audience for all of the above, but I'm not Britney Spears. Like, and even if I try, like I tried to actually be like a session drummer and go play for other bands.
Yeah.
And like be the dude for hire that could just make a living playing drums.
Right.
And I didn't like that at all.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I've got to learn exactly how this song was written. The drum part I don't like. I have to play the part I don't like anyway. And it's not about doing what I don't like. It's more about, like there's a part, and it's something that I don't know how to voice as I kind of stumble through it. Like, I don't know why I create the way that I do, but I do know that I've made a series of decisions to not exploit, like in the very technical sense of exploit my creative output.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I think it makes total sense. And I think it's really important. And that's, I think, part of the conversation that I want to have with people, because I come across artists of all disciplines who may feel stuck or not satisfied or something because they think they have to be in a particular place. And maybe it comes out as like, I hate marketing, or I'm no good at business, or whatever. But the real question is, well, where do you want to go? It's so easy to get stuck in a place where you think that success looks like X, and you can spend 10, 20 years pursuing X and find yourself miserable.
100%.
Because like you said, now you're not even doing what you wanted to do in the first place. And it would have been better to work at the bank and have all this time to just do your creative thing in the, on the weekends, at nights, whatever. But I think a lot of people don't even think that way or feel like it's not okay.
Right. Well, I mean, and then again, it comes down to like in someone's, like in the heart of hearts, like what are they trying to do? Am I, like, I have to think about this all the time. Like, so when Lost Origins opened, like I was adverse to having an Instagram feed. I just didn't.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not doing it. Yeah. And then someone came into the gallery that was like, I see your stuff online. I wish I could see it. It's a shame that I can't, blah, blah, blah. And it's like that one conversation, I was like, you know what? That is different than what I thought I would do with this Instagram story, And so like with social media, I do it very sparingly. I don't have some sort of grandiose influencer scenario where it's like, I'm going to do this, where you have like a video and you point up and then you point over here.
Things are popping out everywhere. Yeah.
Just trending. I'm trending. Yeah, I do it enough to be like mildly there. But I was going through, I was like, how do I not have photos of all of these exhibits that I did? I was like, because I used to not document this stuff. And I was like very specific about time and place, and you come here to meet, and all those types of things. And I use that as an illustration because I'm not set in my ways of like, I'm not doing this, like if it makes sense, I've got opinions, and if they don't make any sense, they don't apply, then I'll change them. I'll adapt.
That's wise. Yeah. That's really wise.
Yeah.
Well, it's talking about things like marketing and business and stuff like that, and marketing things that are not as accessible if we're not Britney Spears. Like, how do you think? I mean, you're somebody who works incredibly hard to pursue whatever it is that you're pursuing, or to share that with people. Like, how do you approach that when you're trying to connect with audiences or groups of people when it's not necessarily as commercial as other things?
Like, what do you mean? Like,
well, like you were talking about, I mean, you doing Syrian chants and,
So the way that one of the lessons I've learned over the years, I learned this. So here's a really good example of what I feel is successful, right? 2019, at the end of 2018, I was trying to set, Lost Oranges had only been open for 2 years. And I was kind of getting all of my exhibits kind of lined up for 2019. And then 2019 was the year of music for the Smithsonian. And so the Folklife department said they would like to partner with Lost Origins for every exhibit that was music related for 2019. Wow. That's insane. Wow. First off. But what that means is every artist that was going to exhibit in 2019 would be in the permanent Smithsonian digital archives because it would be partnered with them. So, and I had that was the year I had a music photo book launch. We had the big Fugazi exhibit, the first exhibit the band was involved with, and like all these things. And so Smithsonian also was going to have light funds to fabricate exhibits at Lost Origins. It's like, this is crazy, And so all of these things have kind of snowballed around a mutual respect for the way we both work. Like the way that I approach arts and culture is almost the same exact way that department does. And it's just by fluke, I'm like, cannot believe it's actually happening. I go in and have a formal meeting with the director. It becomes formal. I pull some favors, have like a celebratory dinner. This is on a Thursday night. And then Friday night, the government shutdown of 2018 into 2019 happens.
Oh, wow, right.
And all of it goes away. All of it. And the Smithsonian Folklife Festival was actually canceled. But so all of the funding, everything that was for the festival and all the programming, got cut. To pick up the pieces, I got asked to host the Folklife Festival in Mount Pleasant at Lost Origins.
Wow.
And so, I was like, what the hell? Like, totally. But so the locations were 2 offsite locations. One was the Anacostia roller rink, and the other was Lost Origins in the plaza here in Mount Pleasant. And so I met tons of people on that. And then we got to we had a big concert. Folklife ran 3 or 4 workshops inside of Lost Origins. It was insane. Yeah. And so how much did I get paid for that? 0. How much did I ask for? 0. I don't. Right. That experience, learning how all of that works, is far more valuable than a couple grand for whatever, know? But which circles back to what I was getting ready to say is during that process, I was trying to figure out, how many people do you think are going to show up to these workshops? And the curator was like, Jason, one of the biggest lessons that we learn here at the Smithsonian, it's like when you're programming for the public, you have no clue how many people are coming. The success is that it's happened, not attendance. And so I took that to heart deeply, whether it's how many people attend an exhibit, how many people show up to a book talk, or whatever. And so a lot, like whether it's success for our culture is usually measured by volume.
Mm-hmm.
How much money have you made?
Yeah.
How many likes have you gotten? How much were in attendance, as opposed to, and it's not necessarily quantity over quality, because you can definitely have both and have something extra successful. But I think in the last several years, I have noticed that there is more emphasis on the quantity and a devaluation of quality.
Yeah.
And so I'm sticking with quality over quantity. and if they intersect, awesome. If not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of thinking on a meta level about what art does, and that idea that, that it happened. It was here. The quality of that, like the fact that we make art is almost a reminder or a counter to all of that other stuff, that it makes us stop and remember that there's more, that there is something more to than just having more. There's more to life than just having more.
And then one of the things, have you ever seen that movie 24 Hour Party People? It came out maybe like 2000, 2001. It's about the factory record label from the UK that did like Joy Division and New Order and all of that. And the way that the movie starts is, or one of the early scenes, I don't remember if it actually starts like this, but you basically see a band on stage from the perspective of the band looking out into the audience. And it's a pretty dismal turnout, right? Like, there's not that many. It's a pretty sparse audience. And then you find out it's not just a band, it's actually the Sex Pistols, right?
Wow.
And there's not that many people there. And then it pans back into the audience. And then in text bubbles over the people in the audience, it's showing the viewer all of the bands and the wave of creativity that was started from attending that one concert. Yeah. And so I've always kind of felt that, like, to kind of circle back to like what I've resigned to is like, my output is not commercially viable, but it's more on the not influencer, but it's more influential than it is commercial. Yeah. And then looking at that Sex Pistols thing, like, that was kind of like the Frodus experience, where it's not, we didn't play to a ton of people. We did a little bit more towards the end, but like, to this day, it's like 30 something years ago, like talking to people that were, had heard or are fans of or whatever is far greater than anything I would have ever thought of. Yeah. Being a kid. Yeah. And so taking that same kind of principle to the art world and to the arts and culture sphere is something I kind of, it's the way that I approach it. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, people can attend or not attend, but like what I'm doing, at some point will be cool to somebody or be meaningful, not cool,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that's important for creatives, for artists, to be able to approach what we do with a sense that what I do matters, what I make matters, regardless of, if I'm the only one that gets to enjoy it, or one person or two to have the faith really that it matters that I create, even if in some cases it may not be until, after I die that, it's discovered, or maybe it is just for a small group of people. Like being able to work from that posture, I feel like opens up the possibilities for so many things that get cut off if it's like, it has to be.
Well, it goes, it goes even for me, like, so like that thing of like, you know, someone creating, being like, if you're painting, photographing, writing songs, whatever, for the sole purpose of trying to impress someone else, like you failed at the beginning.
Right.
Like you are
Right.
setting yourself up for disappointment because you are writing for you are expressing yourself or fabricating expression in yourself for, you know, external assurance,
Yeah.
you know? And so if that's your impetus for doing it, that's where the commercial decisions come in. Then, you know, do something that's like palatable for the masses, and then you'll get that pat on the back or that paycheck or whatever it
Right.
is. But if you're making something like, and you're not really sure why, then that's kind of a solid starting place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that. I've seen people give advice to artists to start creating things that will be more marketable. You know, you should start doing that as a postcard, but it's at the beginning as opposed to at the end. Like it's a very different thing to create something and then to step back and sit and say, okay, well, how should we market this? How do we share this with people? It's another thing to, like you said, start from the beginning. Well, if I change myself, if I change the work, if I change the scope in this way, that way, or that way, then more people might like it. And you are setting yourself up because you never know. There's no, I mean,
Right.
that is kind of the way, the mentality, I think, anyway, for marketing and the way our world functions right now of like, how can you turn this into something that's going to get attention or make money or whatever?
I think the term is, how do I monetize this?
Yes, there we go. Yes.
And so with this, from everything from like creating some kind of YouTube channel to create to get paid, or reselling whatever trinkets, whatever, on Amazon to get paid, that is different than art. I do not consider, I personally don't consider that art. Like that's content. Like you're creating something to be consumed. You are creating something for the sole purpose of like financial transaction. You're actually selling your rights to someone else so they can collect data and exploit everything, which some people don't care. Like, I don't care. That's fine. You know, and that is one approach. That's just, I just don't participate in that approach at all, and never have, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like, as my like son is now kind of working on, like, I told him, I don't like him watching videos on YouTube of people playing video games. Right.
Right.
I was like, I would much rather you get off and go play a video game than watch someone else play. I was like, but even better, I'm going to give you my old computer. Why don't you learn how to make your own video games?
Yeah.
Like here you go. Like what engine do we need to get? Like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but there is a thing where he was like, you know, we can sell ads on these games that he's going to make and make money. It's like, I need to read how that works. But that is the impetus, and that from the very beginning, that's how these things are kind of ingrained going forward, you know, in the younger generation.
Yeah. Well, what's your perspective on sort of the bigger function of what art is meant to be? I know that's a huge question, but like, what role do you think it serves? And I think that connects to our motivations too, of like, why are you drawn to it? Why is that your thing?
So I had this epiphany, when was this? I don't do exhibits that often. I did an exhibit of new material probably about 4 years ago, maybe 3, of these big California, like Fuji, let me borrow one of their medium format cameras. And I went with the family in 2021 to the Eastern Sierras. So like big open spaces, Death Valley, all these kind of things. And really, sunsets, all it kind of landscapes, like landscape work. And I was coming up with text for the exhibit. And right before, I had spent a week writing all this text and intro about why I do all this. And then I went to go see a friend who's a major photographer speak. And he did a whole thing of like, why do we do all this? Like, why do we spend so much time doing this? And he's won like 2 Pulitzer Prizes and, like an awarded guy. And I really thought, it's like, I need to sit down and actually think, why do I do this? Like, a lot of the photos that I'm gravitated towards of my own work, there is no one in them. No people are in them. And there's a lot of color in them. I don't like to do black and white. I was like, why? And I couldn't really figure it out. And then a lot of time, like I was like, okay, I'm actually going to sit down and question myself because I don't normally.
Yeah.
And I was like, these are my points of solitude. So like, there's like these really like, to this day, like, I'll have some of these pieces out and they're big, like 4 feet by 8 feet, like huge.
Wow.
Really kind of serene moments. And people are like, oh, were you alone? I was like, no, my kids are actually standing 2 feet behind me as I took this. Or like, oh yeah, I jumped out of an RV and took this really quick before we went on to the next moment.
Right.
But so what has kind of hit me is, as a photographer, coming out of that really intense, really life-changing project in Syria, and then having that devolve into an international war and, having friends executed and all of those types of things, I use photography as my Zen, as like my personal reset. And so to circle back to your question of like, what was the question? Like, what is the greater purpose of art?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's honestly, it's individual, but I think for a lot of people, it is a way. It's more like, I believe art and science is the language of God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you reveal yourself? Like, it's not in the calendar. Like, there's not a whole lot of spiritual reverence coming out of an iCal.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's these places, moments, times where it inspires reflection. And so it's something that I'm actively thinking about. So last week I held a friend of mine, she's from the National Gallery of Art, had a wedding, and I hosted the like pre-ceremony at Lost Origins. And I didn't have an exhibit. And I was like, I've got some of my stuff I can pull out of the closet if you want me to install. So I did like a temporary install of a Syria exhibit that I did maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And it was the first time in, I think, almost ever, where I had my work up in a room where I didn't know anyone except one person. Like, like at openings, I know a good chunk of people that are there, And so there was so much, I had so many conversations with people about what was on the wall, and they did not know that I was the photographer. That at the end of the night, I was like, okay, it is time. I'm going to do a new solo exhibit. It inspired me. It inspired me to, because I was like, if my stuff is affecting this group of strangers and they don't know that it's me, I didn't tell them either. I was like, this is powerful. And whatever they're connecting with, I'm sitting on a whole bunch of other stuff that could be potentially as engaging. And I would like to try to facilitate something like that.
Yeah. Well, is it for you, on thinking about the Syria thing and just kind of a little bit of how this part of the conversation started, is there a spiritual component to making art for you? I mean, is that a part of your language with God, or is it?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
But passive yes.
Okay.
I would have never had the reflection that we just talked about had I not done any of it, had I not taken the photos. But I never, and this is the part that is the key to all of this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have any of this if I didn't decide to share this with anyone.
Right.
Like, the whole point is, like, I do these things, I put them out in the public without really knowing why.
Yeah.
And then after getting feedback, then it makes me kind of question, okay, why do I do this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so that is kind of part of the bigger, the divine conversation of, reflection, submission, kind of whatever the words are. But, like, I don't know. Did I answer the question? Like,
you did. And I'm finding it fascinating too, because talking to different people who, again, within those archetype kind of, and it's just a little game tool. It's not anything scientific or anything there, but the way that people approach things based on kind of how we're wired, and you are in this creator brain, and then kind of the impact and the meaning of that comes upon reflection afterwards, where some people start the other way around. And so it's fascinating. I find it so interesting to, because you are such a creative person, and what you do ends up being so meaningful in so many different arenas, that it's just really interesting to hear how that processes in your brain, where you're coming from.
There was a moment on my last trip to Syria. I was permitted to record this Sufi order, right? This was the first album that I released 10 years ago. And, that's when I was on, like, NPR, all that stuff. But so I called the guy from the Smithsonian. I was like, what? Is there something I should ask them to record? And there was a Sufi phrase, actually, in Arabic, which I can't remember. But the sentiment was, jump in the current and let the river take you. And so through a long series of events, I have done that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so instead of trying to fight the river, I'm in it.
Yeah. But
specifically have jumped in. Like, I've got on a life vest. Like, I'm not some, like, just like, I'm here. Take me where you want. As you, like, sink to the bottom. Like, I'm semi-prepared for the journey. But, like,
no, that's a great metaphor. That's so good.
And so a lot of it is if you legit, like, surrender to the will, like, it's a ride.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. We talk with the Soulmaker stuff that we're developing in the podcast, trying to encourage people to think about calling and purpose beyond just what you do or what you produce, like that thing, as if there is one thing, but to think about it in a threefold way of really focusing on becoming who you were created to be, paying attention to the creative work of art that you are, but, to the interior life and what's really important about being human and those kinds of things, as well as how you make and the process and the way that you interact with people, that, and this idea that of showing up to the work as if what you're doing matters. All of those things are part of fulfilling our calling, not just something we do or something that makes money or something that other people think is important. That it's about fulfilling all of who we are and bringing all those things together every day.
Right.
And I think that, you're talking about not everybody values everything that's created, but it's really important, I think, to be in those spaces where you're curious like that. I think that's a lot of what I hear from you too, is just this curiosity and willingness to explore.
Yeah. I mean, and explore without any semblance of outcome. It's like, I don't understand why there is this expectation that like, okay, I have this interest. I really like doing this. I need to make money off of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Why?
Right.
Because that's what we're told. Like that. I mean, that, unfortunately, that's capitalism, like there's the other part of it is like, this is how I actually got into photography. My bands broke up. I ended up working at this weirdo day spa as a receptionist in Tyson's Corner. This is how I met my wife. God, 24 years ago. But it was just a job. And so I was like, dude, I go to work at 10 and I'm done at 7. Yeah. I go to sleep at 2. I got another 8 hours after work. And that is how I taught myself how to use a camera.
Wow.
So I had time for a hobby. And then of course, quickly it turned into a profession.
Right.
It turns to a profession. And that's part of the entrepreneur in me too. It's like, I say all this stuff. It's like, but then I will immediately turn it into a thing.
Right.
You
got that drive. Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about motivation, but what is there anything that kills your creativity? Like, what do you have to guard against, and how do you do that?
Ego.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been asked a couple of times over the past, there's been a lot of struggle the last 2 years where someone's like, oh, we really like what Lost Origins is doing. Can you do this over here? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. I did 2 pop-up spaces, and because I've kind of built my own world in the real world, I don't know how much what I do is worth in reality. If I got hired by a museum to, do an exhibit, I have no idea. I mean, I know now, but I have no idea how much that is. And so it was the first time I knew, they were giving me this pop-up space. We had a killer exhibit with the National Park Service with their large format photographer on Ellis Island. It was a bigger conversation about 80% of Ellis Island is, off limits to the public, but he's the guy that photographed the whole property. And this whole conversation about immigration and, X, Y, and Z. And I knew it was being Lost Origins as a quote unquote brand was being leveraged by this organization to bring in, investment into this neighborhood, all this kind of stuff, which I was like, I'm okay with, but I will work to the bone, for little to nothing, as long as I know that there's mutual respect for what I do.
Right.
And I found out that, someone else was paid 3 times more than me to just do some design work. And I was like, what in the hell?
Mm.
And so I felt so betrayed because it was well, that's what they asked for. I was like, so instead of you as an organization that deals with this all the time, valuing what I do and then offering me what they know my value is, you're saying you're making me beg for my worth.
Right.
You already know it. I don't. You're taking advantage of me.
Right.
And so now we have to have a conversation because X, Y, and Z. Like, it was so infuriating that like it sucked. It bummed me out so hard.
Yeah.
And there's been a handful of times where someone has when my intentions are distorted and thought of as negative or whatever, like that sucks the soul out of me.
Yeah.
In a way that is absolutely terrible for me.
Yeah.
You know, like doing all these things kind of for kind of the greater good is kind of my approach. And then willingly kind of lending my name to this organization and these things to do this stuff for a grossly underpaid, which I agreed to, but then to come to find out it's just because I didn't ask for more was so annoying.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah, because it goes against exactly how you operate in the world. It's a much bigger thing than just money.
Yeah.
As well.
And so it's like, oh, you know what I brought to the table was worth way more. You just decided to pay me less.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I used to get really annoyed as getting monetary incentives. Like I years ago I worked, this is the first time Jenny and I worked together at a facility, and they're like, oh, if you'll get a bonus of like $100 if you refer a person from this part of the business to the other part of the business. And I used to get so pissed. I was like, what makes you think I'm not going to do that to begin with? Like, the only reason I am here is because I believe in all the people that work here. Do you honestly think paying me a bonus is going to encourage me?
Yeah.
I was like, just pay me more then.
Right.
Like, I don't understand. And it's just like, I also know that I'm not normal. Like we were talking about earlier, like that's not a normal reaction to get pissed off when someone's offering you more money.
I am morally outraged. No, I totally understand it. It makes sense with how you kind of feel. Well, let's go in the opposite direction then. And maybe this will be our last question. For you, what does it feel like when you are working totally within what kind of motivates and turns you on, like all the pieces are in the right? How does that feel for you to be in that kind of creative zone?
Positive? I don't know.
Are you, I mean, it seems like that's really energizing for you because you are a go kind of guy.
Yeah. So here's a perfect, like, I will tell you a story. I'll tell you two moments that I will take to my grave of something that I'm beyond proud of. Right. So I think it would be 3 years ago, I got asked to host the 100th anniversary of the White House News Photography Association.
Wow.
Yes, right? I was like, what? Sure. In a heartbeat. So it was 3 photographs per president for the last 100 years.
Wow.
The curator was the former head curator and photo editor for the museum, and I did my thing. Like, everything had to be like wildly licensed from all the photography, all the stuff. All the photographers came that were alive.
Oh, how cool.
It was insane. Like, I was like, oh crap. Like, here's this like legendary photo of John F. Kennedy. Like, this is so as I'm unpacking it, I was like, this is insane that I'm unpacking these iconic images that I'm putting up in my gallery. Like the whole thing was just like super surreal.
Yeah.
And then, they left it up to me to do the design, which I was like, are you sure? They're like, we trust you. I was like, are you sure? Okay. And the opening went off killer. Like the whole thing was awesome. And so I do what I do. And then I always get nervous, is not like anxious, maybe is the right term, of like, that event is normally at the Library of Congress. I'm like, I hope this is like good, good enough, And so at the end, the curator was like, from the design to the energy in the room to everything, this was probably the best exhibit I've ever been a part of. I was like,
wow.
oh my God. Okay. Thank you. And it was kind of like getting that feedback from an ultra pro was really affirming for me.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, this is incredible. And the other and confidence building, kind of like, I hope this is cool. And then again, so like we're having the opening, the room is packed with people, everyone's like this like kind of celebrate a photo journal. So it's like, all right, everybody, raise your hand if you want a Pulitzer Prize. No one raised their hand. It's like, come on, seriously? Just put your hand in the air. Like 90% of the room raised their hand. I was like, oh my God. Wow. I was like, all right, raise your hand if you won more than 2. 75% of the room was like, this is awesome. I was like, hey, for the closing, bring your Pulitzers. We'll do shots off of everyone's Pulitzers if you want. This will be awesome. Everyone had a good time.
Yeah.
And like for me, hosting these like extremely serious, that is a very serious exhibit,
right?
But bringing humor and levity to it in a way that celebrates the creators, and then simultaneously honors the work is kind of where where I sit with Lost Origins.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like, what is on the wall is dire for me. Like, it needs to be perfect. Like, there's been numerous times where like the morning of the exhibit, I will drive to go buy a special light to make sure it's like, but then the interaction with everyone is serious conversations combined with being funny and whatever, to kind of humanize this creative world.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like the perfect storm of everything coming together.
Like I have been, I reflect a lot. Like like Lost Origins Gallery is kind of it is the ideal, it's everything that I've ever done. It's like all of my strengths kind of condensed into one place. Like hosting people, meeting people, being able to be creative with people or myself, like kind of problem solving, like connecting people, like doing all these things is what kind of guided me to do these things all over the world. And now I can kind of bring it home and do it here in DC.
Yeah. I just appreciate so much you taking the time to talk with us today. It has been very, very fun and interesting to hear how your mind works and how all of this has come together.
I don't know if that's a good sampling of how my brain works, but I hope it's good enough.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And we'll put in the show notes and all the stuff like that. We'll put the links for Lost Origins and other stuff so people can find you and connect, and especially if you're in the DC area.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Of course.
Join us next time when we explore the mystic artist's spiritual archetype.
Thanks for listening to Be Make Do, a Soulmakers podcast. All links and resources are located in our show notes. Want to know your artist archetype? Take the quiz at soulmakers.org/quiz.